All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar. I'm Ashley Limbers, the marketing lead here at Encompass Solutions, and I'm happy to be your moderator for this session. For those of you who are new to Encompass Solutions, let me give you a quick introduction. We are a North Carolina-based ERP consulting and implementation firm with over 25 years in business, and we have a global team of just over 40 staff members. We focus exclusively on serving the manufacturing and distribution industries, delivering solutions to help organizations streamline their operations, overcome challenges, and help drive growth. And as a premium partner of Epicor, we have nearly 2 decades of experience delivering tailored ERP systems. What truly sets us apart is our partner first mindset. We don't just implement software, we work closely with our clients to ensure their ERP solutions are tailored, optimized, and aligns with their business goals. And for today's session, we're going to be focusing on building a 2026 roadmap presented by our knowledgeable speakers, consultant John Sherry, our director of advanced support, Jason Claggett, and our project manager Francisco Lopez. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be sent to all registrants. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel, and we'll answer as many as we can during the live Q&A at the end. And lastly, we'd appreciate it if you could take a minute to fill out the quick survey after today's session. It helps us keep improving these events for you. Now we'll turn things over to our first presenter. Please join me in welcoming John Sherry. John, over to you.
Hey guys, appreciate it, Ashley. Appreciate everybody for being here on the webinar with us today. I'm John Sherry. I'm a hybrid financial operations consultant. I have a heavy background in operations, very specifically about 10 years in oil and gas manufacturing, where I worked everywhere from the ground up. I started off as a material handler and worked myself all the way up through operations management and kind of those leadership positions before coming over and starting my consulting career right around everybody's favorite time of the last half decade, which was COVID. So in any case, been consulting on Epicor for some years now, specifically focused on Epicor Kinetic, which is pretty important for us as we reach that sunsetting of kind of the classic clients and stuff in May of 2026. So I won't make you guys look at my ugly mug anymore. We'll go ahead and move forward into what we want to talk about today, which is how do we really make our 2026 as efficient as possible? I think something that we're all aware of in today's landscape is kind of the risk of inaction with the way emerging technologies are really starting to dominate the marketplace, whether that's white collar jobs or marketing or kind of anything else going there. The acceleration has been incredible. The advent of AI, the Internet of Things continuing to grow, all the cloud native platforms that are out there, and even the data analytics are redefining how manufacturers plan, source, and deliver. Customer demands, I think everybody here is pretty aware of this, but customer demands have increased exponentially as well. Customers now expect a level of speed, transparency, and customization that we haven't quite seen before. And it's making all of us be able to, adapt really quickly. And those of us who aren't able to do that, quite frankly, are going to get left behind, right? And then on top of that, I think we saw this with COVID quite a bit, but then some other things that are going on with tariffs and kind of the trade stuff going around the world right now. But there's been a lot of supply chain volatility. I think that wasn't quite there in previous years, particularly since I've been coming up and working through supply chain and manufacturing. And those manufacturers who have strong data integration between, their supply, production, and sales definitely outperform their peers during these disruptions. We saw a lot of big name brands and big name companies fail to make it through the COVID crisis, right? And so those things aren't going away, right? As we continue to move along, AI is only going to get more powerful, right? And so, being able to analyze and take advantage of data quickly, and being able to be prepared for these outages. You just never know when there could be, a war or a pandemic or anything else going on throughout the world. And with everything being a global marketplace nowadays, we really need to be able to be prepared for everything that can be thrown our way. Something to keep in mind is when people think about ERP systems, typically they think about this large kind of legacy platform that they use that's kind of very static, doesn't get a whole lot of updates other than maybe you're adding new product in or you're adding new employees and new users into your system. But your ERP really can't just be a static backbone. It needs to be a living ecosystem that can integrate with emerging technologies. Failing to adapt to AI, the Internet of Things, and or cloud native platforms can create hidden gaps, and we really don't want any of you to fall into that. So some common pitfalls, right? Like what leads to us either having an action or making, improper choices or maybe not well-advised choices. The first thing is hidden technical debt. And I actually have a handout for technical debt for you guys to review post this webinar. It kind of explains what technical debt is and where the common things that you'll see. There's, I think, 30, 40 items on there, something along those lines that you guys can kind of just go through and quick hit. But where this really shines through and where you'll see issues is old customizations and unsupported add-ons make our upgrades kind of expensive and brittle, right? So from an Epicor standpoint, when we look at maybe a highly customized Epicor 9 environment, or even older Vantage, some of the other older Epicor versions, when we highly customize and we're not staying up to date with our upgrades, what ends up happening is down the road, it's kind of like, when you're a kid, I'm pretty sure everybody did this. You would kick your clothes under the bed instead of actually putting them into the laundry hamper or going in and washing them, right? And so it would get to a point where you didn't have any more clothes to wear, but B, when you did have to go do your laundry, you just hated it, right? Like that was me as a kid, 100%. And it's kind of the same thing when you're upgrading an ERP system, right? If you have a whole bunch of old customizations that you haven't been maintaining or making sure that it's going to upgrade with new versions or running analyzers, those types of things that we do during our upgrades, it just makes everything a lot more burdensome, right? And the expense doesn't always come through in the actual application or in the licensing. The expense may just be opportunity costs because of all the work that we're having to do internally. It could be just labor costs or consulting costs. It kind of depends on each individual situation. But this technical debt is something that companies, I believe, oversee quite often because it's already there and it's quote unquote working for us now. But working for us now doesn't necessarily mean it's efficient, right? We might just be turning a blind eye to it. The other thing is data silos. And so what I mean by that is when we have fragmented systems, that's going to prevent real-time decision making. So not everybody who uses Epicor uses the CRM in Epicor, right? A lot of people use Salesforce, they use HubSpot, they may use some type of third-party warehouse management system or something along those lines. But when we don't have that information flowing to each other somehow, whether we have some type of managed database system or another relational database or APIs going between the systems, what's really happening is there's going to be a lot of stuff that falls through the cracks. You're not going to get the communication that you need between your departments. You may flat out miss things. Data may be correct in one system and incorrect in the other, right? So we have duplicate data. I think anybody who does data analysis knows how annoying duplicate or incorrectly formatted data can be between two different databases. So it's important that, especially in today's world where everything is interconnected, right? With the internet, social media, everything is interconnected nowadays. There's no reason for our enterprise software to not be integrated with the other softwares that we're using. Sometimes that means you need to do APIs. Sometimes that means you need to do elimination. Sometimes that means you do need to add something on and then figure out the proper way to integrate it. But the important thing here is that you identify how are we handling this and how do we get real-time communication that doesn't duplicate data and is all formatted in the same way. Going along with that is inflexibility. So again, when a company needs to spin up a new product line, a site, potentially a new company in a merger and acquisition situation, outdated ERPs just can't scale enough or fast enough, right? There are capabilities that are constantly coming out as ERPs become updated. Um, Epicor is constantly consolidating screens. So one example of that would be kind of like the buyer workbench. The buyer workbench takes all of your RFQs, your PO suggestions, PO change suggestions, new POs, PO approvals, rejections. All of that is in one screen in Epicor Connect nowadays. In older versions, it wasn't there. And so there's a lot of streamlining that happens with processes that companies aren't able to take advantage of because they're in an outdated ERP that's 10 years behind. When we take today's landscape right now, and you consider if you went back 5 years ago, no one was using anything like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, right? And nowadays, companies really can't imagine not using AI or some kind of AI parallel to increase their efficiency. So if we're willing to admit that with other business processes, then we need to make sure that we're also willing to take that same approach with our ERP. Because at the end of the day, your ERP really needs to be your digital backbone, linking your innovation, compliance, and customer experience. And these pitfalls that we're talking about here and others can derail your ERP modernization if they aren't addressed early or frequently enough. So, how do we assess our current ERP environment? So from an operations standpoint, and when I say operations, I don't mean just production, but just our day-to-day business processes. So this could be finance or it could be ops. But where are our manual workarounds hiding, right? The easiest one to identify here, a manual workaround, if you have an ERP system and you're using spreadsheets somewhere that isn't just using something along the lines like Power BI to do data analytics, you have a manual workaround that is holding you back, plain and simple. One of the most common ones I see is planning. People will do their Excel sheets and they'll do all their planning in Excel. Meanwhile, you have an ERP system sitting right here, right? Um, Things like that, anything that you take out of your system that can be done in the system is a manual workaround that, other than very specific use cases or scenarios, and they do exist, but we should not be working outside of our ERP. We need to maintain it as our one source of truth and then integrate out from there if stuff needs to be taken outside of the ERP. The second one is the user experience. And I don't think this one gets asked often enough, but how much time do employees spend fighting the system versus using it to drive insights, right? So we talk about this all the time when we're implementing Epicor or upgrading, but it goes for any ERP that you're using. Um, One thing is if employees are having to fight the system, what I can guarantee you in my experience is that they're going to go outside the system to make their life easier, right? And so then that just dives back to the manual workarounds as well. But the other thing too is having a bad time as an employee in your software it kind of puts us in a negative mindset to begin with, right? No one wants to struggle in their day to day, and that's going to impact work performance. That's going to impact how we treat our customers. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Humans are emotional beings. And so if we're making our life harder than it needs to be with the user experience side of things, then we're ensuring that our business is not performing to the level that it needs to perform at. Going along with that also is process misalignment. So this really should be, in my opinion, probably a yearly thing. But we need to evaluate whether your ERP reflects your current business processes or those from 5 years ago, right? There's can't tell you how many times we go into a client's end user procedures or standard operating procedures, whatever you guys like to call them. And this is stuff that hasn't been updated in forever, or a lot of companies don't have them at all. And so when you ask someone what their processes are, then you need to, be able to document that. We don't want tribal knowledge. We want documented knowledge, and we want to be able to make sure that these processes still align with what we're doing. And then we've talked about this a little bit already, but your integration health. So we need to examine how data flows between your ERP and your external systems, right? It's important that we make sure that your ERP isn't limiting your business agility, because if it's limiting your business agility, it's really not a system. Your ERP has become a bottleneck. So with that being said, let's talk about kind of your current version and timelines. So we need to understand on a version life cycle, you need to understand your ERP vendor support horizon. So for instance, Epicor in May of 2026, they are sunsetting the classic forms in Epicor Connect, and you'll no longer be able to use those classic forms if you're a cloud customer, right? You'll have to move to the browser. So that's something that everybody here and anybody who's listening post needs to be aware of and needs to start planning for right now, because that's only, what, 6 months away at this point. Upgrade versus re-implementation. So we need to determine whether our environment is clean enough for just a simple lift and shift. So oftentimes, if you're coming from something like 10.6, 10.2.6 rather, there's a lot of stuff that we can lift and shift. Or if you're coming from something older or something completely different, if an entire process reengineering effort is justified to make sure that our ERP is aligning. And then kind of the last thing here is the roadmap governance. So just like any other project you have, we need to assign ownership to the roadmap governance so that that plan is adhered to and any changes to it can flow through one source, and we have consistent drivers getting us to the end of the project successfully. So I'm going to recap just real quick. So some key takeaways for us. Again, your 2026 ERP roadmap or your ERP roadmap on a yearly basis isn't just about software. It's about building the resilience, adaptability, and digital continuity across the business or businesses. Your structured ERP assessment provides a factual baseline to prioritize modernization efforts, allocate our capital intelligently, and minimize business risk. And then the other thing that we talk about, and Jason will talk about this more with you guys, is waiting for something to break instead of having a structured roadmap is going to leave your IT team firefighting. Excuse that typo right there where it says firing, but firefighting fires really instead of innovating. And so it becomes a reactionary model instead of a preventative model. And we really don't ever want to be reactionary. You always want to be ahead of the game here. And quite honestly, if we do have to do workarounds, that's usually the most honest feedback your system can give you. So working to eliminate those and improving our processes rather than solving crises as we come along. So from there, that's what I wanted to talk with you guys about today. I will pass it over to Jason, where he's going to talk about assessing your current ERP environment and the support structure that you need to be successful.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. I have, as Ashley mentioned at the beginning, my name is Jason Claggett. I'm the Director of Advanced Support here at Encompass. My job over the last probably decade or so is creating support teams and support plans and coming up with ways that businesses can use their own internal support as well as their external teams as necessary. So without further ado, let's jump into the next 5 to 10 minutes. I'll be kind of walking you through how to look for structuring an internal and external support and when to use them. I'll also go a little bit into training and some ongoing training that you might find insightful. So I guess the first thing we'd like to talk about here is, what does it look like from a balance from, when do you need internal support versus bringing in an external support team to be kind of complementary to what your internal team can do. And I guess the first thing I would probably encourage everyone to do is empower your internal team leads to take ownership of the issues, to make sure that they're training their users, and make sure that they have the right tools in place to make sure they can get their jobs done and be effective. Use the team leads in the event that you need to partner with an external support team like Encompass, that they are there to facilitate that and not necessarily be a roadblock. Oftentimes we see that internal teams, whether they're IT or a manager at a manager level, they think they can come in and solve everything, and then they end up kind of kicking the can down the road. I like John's analogy of putting the clothes underneath of the bed. I like that analogy, John. That was a good one. But they kind of kick the can down the road, and then it gets worse as time goes on, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, now we've got a real emergency on our hands, and we really need some help from some senior level experts. Use the external team to extend your internal team. I mean, look at us as a partner and someone who you can bounce ideas off of, and make sure that what you're teaching your users is sound advice or good training. And in the event that you are going through multiple projects, you have in most cases, a lot of our customers, they have day jobs, and their main job is not to support the ERP system on site. So offload some of that day-to-day support to an external source, someone like an Encompass, or if you're need some help with like an IT provider or something like that, that might be an area that you can look at as well. I guess the bottom line on this particular slide is to find the balance between the internal and external support and make the necessary changes where applicable. Well, let's talk a little bit. I know John covered some pitfalls that you have, and I just want to say these are some signs that you may need some external help. I mean, if you're seeing some significant disruptions in operations, much like what John was talking about, you have, the world is an ever-changing place. We have supply chain issues. We have, just constraints all around. We have businesses being acquired or merging, and there's significant disruptions. Your users are pulled in 2 or 3 different places every day. Maybe a sign that you need some external help. If your production delays from a product is there and not meeting those deadlines, you might need some extra help. I guess my favorite is unhappy customers. I guess that's not really my favorite, but I think that it's worth noting here is that if you have unhappy customers because you're not meeting deadlines or you have significant disruptions in operations, you probably need some external help. You may need some extra internal help too. Obviously, if you've lost some revenue or have employee turnover, those are key factors that you also may need some external help. I guess the bottom line on this one is to make sure that if you are, you're looking internally to make sure that your users are not at capacity, and if they are at capacity and you're seeing some of these signs here, to make sure you address those before they become real fires. So let's talk a little bit about training and change management and user adoption. As John mentioned, the end user procedures, I say create them. Also, I guess would be appropriate as update them. As John mentioned, and I've seen this a few times, is a lot of times customers are creating the end user procedures when they implement their ERP systems, but they very rarely will go back in and dust them off or update them for any sort of changes in the in the workflow. You may have a new customer that requires a certain level of expertise or a certain level of granularity, and you just make sure you are going through and reviewing and updating those end user procedures as often as possible. Train new employees quickly. This is kind of one of the things that we see quite a bit is new employees come in, they're kind of thrown right into the fire, and they're trained on the way that the kind of the last person was trained, and sometimes that is push this button or enter this data here. We don't really know why, and we just want to make sure that we're pushing the order through or making sure the job's being done correctly. Make sure you're training employees. Make sure you have a plan for training them, an onboarding plan, if you will. And the next point is be consistent. Make sure that when you're training new employees or even refresher training with existing employees, that you're consistent in the training. Make sure that that there's procedures are there, that they're being used, they're being updated. And then follow up on a regular basis. Maybe that's monthly, maybe quarterly, or even annually. As John mentioned, sometimes you have to do this on a annual basis. Look at your business. The same thing should be said about your training. Make sure that you're constantly reviewing those and making sure that you're held to those regular standards. Make sure that you have a process for change. Oftentimes we get into customers and we've realized that they don't really have a change process in place. And just make sure that if there's something where there's a change for a specific label, for example, or that you want them to use this screen, or you need them to enter this code for a specific reason, that you have a process for that change. Or if you need a new development effort or an integration, make sure that it has a change, a process for that change. And then lastly, just make sure that any of those changes that you put forth, they have an approval matrix. A lot of times we see that, end user A requests a change to a screen, but it was never approved. And we're sending through functional requirements documents and engineering documents, and the management is going, well, I don't know what this is all about. What is this? And so just make sure you have a very clear approval matrix in your organization so that no surprises are there. Let's talk a little bit about end user adoption. So to drive adoption, you'll want to, I guess the best way to drive adoption would allow all users to have input. What this does is this gives them a kind of a say and gives them some sort of like, hey, I'm part of the team, let's make this happen. Whereas if you're just kind of dictating what they do, oftentimes they won't have any sort of they'll kind of be a little standoffish. Sometimes they begrudgingly do it. But our experience has shown that if you involve the users and allow them to have input along the way, it'll be a much better successful experience for them. Using incentives like lunch and learns, or you kind of give them some sort of game to who's the first person who can successfully enter an order, gets a $5 gift card, or a coffee gift card or something like that. So use incentives, use any sort of gamify type thing to gain their approval. We at Encompass kind of like lunch and learns because it allows us to all kind of take a break. And it's one thing that we've seen that's successful both with some of our internal trainings that we've done, as well as some of our outside vendors that would like to do promotions or stuff like that. We found that always works pretty well. One way to drive user adoption is have your users train other users or new hires. So as the adoption comes out and some of the things that that your ERP, and John mentioned this in his section, they're coming up with new interfaces all the time in Epicor specifically, but I'm sure other ERP systems have their modern look and feel to their browser-based ERPs. So as users are learning these new systems and they're going through and learning the new buttons and what these do, have them train the users on what they've learned, and also incorporate them as part of the new hiring process. I guess what's really important is make sure you provide the why. The ERP usage is important. A lot of times we're just going through the motions, making sure that the orders are getting out the door, stuff's being shipped, but really teaching the end users why this order entry is important, and why you're doing it a specific way. It's important because it flows down to the other areas of the business. Oftentimes that helps drive user adoption, and can really help make things a little bit easier and smoother as you transition into the newer ERP systems. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Francisco. I appreciate your attention. Francisco is going to talk to you about creating a practical action plan.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. So, team, welcome. My name is Francisco Lopez. I've been working with Epicor as a project manager for the last 18 years. So, let's talk about now about the practical action plan. What does this mean, right? So the strategic overview. The ERP upgrade is a critical transformation, right? That we, as a company, we want to achieve the increase of operational efficiency, right? We are looking at the future. We want to look at the business continuity. So another action plan that we need to follow is the discipline budgeting. And this is extremely important. Why? Because we need to have our requirements. The requirements are so important in order for us to not to have issues in the future, or scope creep, right? That we keep adding because we forgot to add or build the requirements that we need to have properly. So we need to do our homework to analyze the corporation, or the current, or what is called the current state, in order to have a successful upgrade implementation. The end user training, as Jason was describing, end user training is extremely important, right? Comprehensive training for end users. Yes, this is something that it will consume a lot of time, but at the end, it will be worth it for the company, and how smooth the transition is going to be from the legacy system to the new system. Extremely important. And post-go live support. You need to have a team that that they are there when something goes wrong, or something just doesn't make sense. Something that can go into your database, look at what is going on, and fix any of the issues that you might be experiencing. Strategic drivers and business benefits. Of course, this is anytime that we put an ERP system in place, that's all we're looking for. What is the business benefit? How are we going to make more money, or what? Which is usually the objective, right? Efficiency, make more money. So the ERP upgrade addresses legacy system limitations. Our system is too old. Do we have, like John mentioned, Excel spreadsheets that are pulling us down instead of we are like looking into the future? How are we going to grow with this old system, right, and improve the user experience? We are using an AS400 DOS system type that pretty much is not up to the standards anymore on how the business are managing at currently, right? Business benefits include real-time data access. What reporting information can I extract? The automation to reduce errors, of course, and lower IT cost. Usually we are going to the cloud. We have IT as a service, so we can always reach the help desk And of course, a ready future infrastructure. If we are in the cloud, we are going to have constant upgrades, right? Every 6 months, usually. That's how Epicor does it now. And we are always going to have the most updated software out there that can help us to reach our goals. I mean, we have to, when we get into this position of having a cloud system, of course, it forces us to always be improving ourselves as a user to keep going and keep up with how things are changing. The core objectives: focus on budget control. Absolutely. Transparency and tailor role specific training. Yes, we have to train our super users according to the department that they are working on. Strategic timing. Yes, upgrade is aligned with business cycles. It is quite normal for us for a company to tell us, hey, we need to go live in July, just to mention an example. Why? Because it's our slow season. Or we have to do this in December because we have our physical inventory. Those are phrases that we commonly hear from our customers, right? So that is extremely important for you to consider when you are deciding to have an ERP implementation. It's just going to be smooth, right? Expected outcomes. So if I am implementing a new ERP system, what do I want? Improved data accuracy, better reports, more information that I can extract from multiple places in the ERP system, right? So I can build better KPIs, or I can actually measure different departments. Faster processes and empower users. Absolutely. Your users are going to be more knowledgeable. They have access to better information, better data. Stakeholder alignment, clear and compelling summary aligned to capture attention. So pretty much everybody in the company is looking at the same information, right? All the departments are aligned with the strategic goal. Everybody's looking at the same target. Strategic planning. So what does this mean? ERP upgrade roadmap. So usually it will take between 12 to 18 months, a big implementation, right? We are not talking about an upgrade. We are talking about a complete phasing out of a legacy system to a new Epicor system, right? So planning and discovery, the first 2 months, discovery, what are the requirements of the company, the business, and then we will have to move to the business case and budget approval. But I have to put emphasis on the first area, right? On the planning, discovery, business case. That is extremely important for the future, so we can actually have a smooth transition. If we have those requirements aligned, then everything else will actually fall naturally into the time frame that we are going to continue on. Configuration, testing, right? Once that we have the business requirements, we are going to configure the system tailored to your business, to those requirements that you already provided, right? We're going to test it out. We're going to see that the results are what you are expecting, right? What is expected of the system. We are going to train the team, go live, and you will have your IT what we call hypercare, or you are going to have the service of our IT department to help you with any issues that you have. Now, after we go live, then we go into what is called stabilization and optimization. That's when you get into, okay, now I know the system. What is it that I can do now to actually increase the utilization of my system, to actually take 100% of this system and just keep moving it forward, right? To make it even better to what I have. So it's actually, once that we reach optimization, it's a great experience to see the users just taking it to the next level and start expanding the utilization of the system. It's quite quite great, right? So the budget, how is the budget allocated? So software and licensing usually take 25% of the budget, right? The infrastructure and hosting usually is going to be a cloud environment, so 50% of the budget will go for that. Implementation services, so your operation consultants, your finance consultants, your IT team, and of course project management, 35% of the cost. Training and change management, 15%. This is quite low because it's internal, right? It's an internal cost, but of course it is a cost because your resources are going to be dedicated to an Epicor and not to the day-to-day task that everybody follows. And contingency and staff backfill, 10%. So, and with that, I send it back to Ashley.
Thank you. That was a lot of great information. Before we get to our Q&A session, we just wanted to talk about our upcoming event. On December 3rd, we're talking about modernizing marine manufacturing and how ERP drives control, visibility, and growth. And so you can scan that QR code if you're interested in joining us. We'll go to the next slide. So now we're going to transition into Q&A. So if you have any questions, please type those into the Q&A box on your control panel, and we will start going over those. While we're waiting for questions to come in, John, Jason, or Francisco, was there anything else that you wanted to mention today in regards to planning for next year? Budgeting, any of the things that maybe were not mentioned that you think our audience should hear?
Not too much for me. I would just say that I don't think we emphasize it enough when we're talking here that your ERP system, or really any system that you're using, business applications wise, they really should be living, breathing creatures, right? This isn't something that you can neglect and expect to continue to get great performance out of it. Year over year, we're always changing processes, doing optimization. It's kind of like going to the gym. A lot of people talk about doing it, only about 10 to 15% actually do it, right? And so, it's just a matter of getting in and doing it. If your business is trying to grow, then your ERP needs to grow with it. If your processes are changing, your processes in your ERP need to change with it as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up having fragmented processes that really just hurt what you're trying to achieve and, quite frankly, can affect your bottom line in a negative manner.
That's a great point. Thank you, John. It doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. As John mentioned, we do have a few documents that we will be sending to you with the recording of this webinar. And if there are any questions that you think of afterwards, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to answer those for you. You can reach us at sales@encompassinc.com or visit our website. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add before we go today?